It was 8th grade when I started experiencing anxiety in school, and I would constantly just have these thoughts and feelings like I was dying, and there was no explanation for it.
As a dad, you want to fix it. Problems come up, you want to just be able to fix it, and I couldn't.
It's almost like your hands are tied, you don't know what to do.
Anxiety really stole a lot from me. It stole joy and peace. I would miss out on volleyball games, or I remember turning back and going home from a horse show, steal what I was meant to be a part of with family and community. 2014, when I was at a youth conference for the first time, when I walked in there, I had chains and I didn't feel the chains anymore. They had lifted, they had broken off.
She went away for that weekend, but when she came back, it was night and day.
Those thoughts I can discern are so separate that's of the enemy and their lies, and they're not of me. My name is Esvi, and I'm from York, Pennsylvania. So I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, they always taught us that, we can have a relationship with God. I remember at a young age, my brother and I, when my family was praying for someone, I remember them being like, okay, we're going to pray for this person. If God shows you a picture, tell us what it is. So we were always expectant that God was going to speak. But it wasn't until 2007, I think, about when I really gave my life to the Lord. And then it wasn't until 2014 that I really encountered God, where it became my own and my relationship with God became my own.
I am Abby Trevino and my husband Ramon Trevino, and we're from York, Pennsylvania. We are Esperanza's parents. Esperanza Lynn.
It was a great environment. It was, all American, I think, good, hardworking parents, good kids, going to school, doing their thing, believing in God, going to church.
Yeah, she had a younger brother, but they were close. She was close to all her cousins, and close to her grandparents. Yeah, just really close to family and stuff like that. So I wouldn't have picked up on what was going on. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm.
It was 8th grade when I started experiencing anxiety in school, and I would constantly just have these thoughts and feelings like I was dying, and there was no explanation for it. I would just constantly go to the nurse's office and be like, I don't feel well. I remember as a young kid, just struggling with those thoughts in my mind. If it wasn't for the Lord, I would be in a completely different headspace. But I do remember struggling with different fears as a young kid. I've heard actually Pastor Brian share the enemy will give you a thought and then convince you that it's yours. And I feel the enemy would wreak havoc a lot in my mind as a young kid. I would just get scared of different things. And so I feel honestly, that could have been where anxiety crept in and just got a hold of just fear of different things, fear of being sick, different things like that. There wasn't necessarily a trigger to my anxiety that I was dealing with, but the lies that were going through my head were that something was wrong and I was dying. That was what I couldn't get out of my head. And so, yeah, even as a little kid, it wasn't necessarily those lies, but it was just other lies of fear of germs and fear of getting sick.
If you would have known Esperanza at that time, you would have been thought to yourself, where's this coming from? Because she was a solid kid. She was good in school. She loved the Lord. She would read her Bible and, go to church and everything. So it was even in that sense, where's this coming from? Because it's not, a part of, who she is. And she didn't deal with things that, I want to say normal, but things that you hear teenagers dealing with on a daily basis or even socially. She really didn't deal with that. So it was mind-boggling in that sense too.
When she got to junior high, I almost think maybe just more kids, more, because it's a bigger environment, and maybe it just was susceptible at that time to just be more anxious with, there was just a lot more on her as a kid and trying to figure out what she was going to be into or doing, because she did volleyball but she only did that for 1 year. And then she ended up backing out of it and didn't do it anymore, which I think she would have been really good with that. But I think anxiety kept her from it because it just was a place where it took a lot out of her to do it, and she did it for a season, but then I think that's when things were, so whether it was that time frame, just a lot of stuff going on, and also she's very much one to put a lot of pressure on herself to do the best. I always said she's one to dot every I, cross every T, and whatever had to be done, she had to get it done. Like, she would get her stuff done before she go to bed that night and have her bag all packed for the next day. So just the pressure that she even put on herself all those times, I mean, I saw that progressing, and whether that added, as parents, it's almost like your hands are tied. You don't know what to do.
Anxiety like really stole a lot from me. Like, it stole joy and peace. And like, I would have to leave class, and I would miss out on volleyball games, or I remember turning back and going home from a horse show. So it like stole from my like community and my life. Like, that fear of having anxiety would like steal my joy and steal like what I was meant to be a part of with family and community. And I just thought that I was going to have to live with it forever. Didn't really think anything of it. It was just like, this will come and it'll go. It'll come and go.
There were 2 different times, and one was going to a horse lesson or a horse show that she was supposed to ride in, and it was like 2 hours away or something. Mm-hmm. We're driving there, and all of a sudden she's like having this attack in the back, like a panic attack. And we're trying to speak truth and talk to her and get her to settle down. We even pulled over at a Walmart, went inside, just thought maybe she'll get her mind off of things and she'll be better. And but it just progressed, and she just was like, I can't do it. So we had to back out of something that she had put a lot of time and effort into, and just the whole thing. I mean, with horse riding, but we ended up turning around and going home because she just couldn't do it.
As a dad, you want to fix it. You know, problems come up, you want to just be able to fix it. And, you know, us telling her simple, you know, biblical truths, you know, didn't seem to work. You know, praying didn't seem to work, you know, even though those things I believe were working, it just didn't seem like it at the moment. But very frustrating to watch your innocent daughter suffer, you know, from something you can't see, you know, something you can't take down on your own. It was very frustrating. So it definitely put us into a place of just going into that secret place together and just praying and just really believing God to do something. But it was a challenge as a dad, because dads just want to come in and, you know, just fix it. And I couldn't.
There was one time that I had to leave school early because I was having an anxiety attack, and like my parents, they would pray for me and like encourage me, but I was so like in my mind. And I feel like the height of it was when I had to go to the emergency room for it. My mom and I went out to go get pizza, and I remember getting out of the car and in the parking lot, just like having the overwhelming feeling of anxiety again. And at that point, like my mom didn't know what to do. She was like, well, do you want me to take you to the hospital? And I just said yes, because I had so convinced myself in my mind that something was wrong with me, like physically. And I remember going to the emergency room. My dad and my cousin met me there. And I remember at one point too, just telling my dad, like, tell me the gospel, because like from the beginning, because I just was so like inside my head and believing the lies, like, you're dying, something's wrong, you're sick. That was like all I could hear. They did a bunch of tests to make sure nothing was like physically wrong. And they came back and said, you know, this is really, what you had was an anxiety attack. It wasn't quite a panic attack. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's a panic attack? Because that was horrible. And they said, you know, it's really common in girls, and it's common in girls your age. And so I just kind of claimed that, and I just lived with that. I went back to school and said, hey, this is what the doctor said. They said I have anxiety, and if it gets worse, I can go back and get put on medication for it. And I was just kind of like, okay, go about my life. You know, it didn't really like skew my vision of God at all. It was just like, I just kind of took it on. Didn't know that I could live apart from it anymore. It just was going to be a part of me. It was a confusing time for me. Like, I remember coming home from the hospital, and like, I was just like, being like goofy and just like my normal self. And my parents were just looking at me like, what just happened? Like, we were just in the hospital and like, now you're home and you're fine. And we're like chilling, eating pizza or whatever. And it was just like, I was like, I don't know, I couldn't describe it, but that was how the doctors described it. So that was what I told people. And that was what I told myself.
She just was like, broke down, like, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do anymore. Like, I just talked to her. I'd been trying to, and that's why I'm like, would you want to go to the hospital? Like, what are we going to do? I don't even know. I think right away they kind of knew that it was more anxiety, that there was nothing physically wrong with her, which gave me a peace because I wasn't at that point still 100% sure, like, what is going on? Like, it just didn't make sense. But
I mean, we were praying separately, we were praying together, and it's one of those things where you get, you feel close to God, but then something like this happens and you're like, God, I really need you. I really need to know that you're there. Like, my child is in danger and I really need to know that you're going to come through, So it definitely gives you a different perspective on how you pray, how you listen, and how you press in.
It wasn't until 2014 when I was at a youth conference for the first time when I really encountered the Lord. I wasn't expecting it because I didn't even know it was possible. But that was when I just experienced Holy Spirit and his presence for the first time. And I could feel him in me. And I knew, like, it's not just he's up there and I'm down here, but it's like God in me. Honestly, I think it was at the end of a message. They just kind of had like worship music playing. And I think at one point I just kind of sat on the floor with my eyes closed and my hands out. And I remember like shivering, like just kind of shaking and thinking like, I didn't know what was happening. Like, my body was physically feeling something, but I didn't know like mentally or like emotionally or spiritually what was going on. Until afterwards when I like stood up and like came out of that encounter, like I knew the chains were broken. But I just felt like heat in my stomach. And I just felt his presence. And then I was just like shaking. So it's kind of weird because I was like shivering, but I felt heat in my stomach. And that was like his presence overwhelming me. I just remember them lining us up and saying, everybody has something to share. And I didn't really know what I was going to share, but I said, okay, got in line and shared about how when I walked in there, I had chains and I didn't feel the chains anymore. They had lifted, they had broken off. I didn't even really have words to describe it. But ever since then, I do not claim to have anxiety. Like, those thoughts I can discern are so separate that that's of the enemy and they're lies and they're not of me. My dad has this really cool painting of hands pulling apart and chains breaking. And I was like, if I could put my testimony into a picture, it would be that picture. She
went away for that weekend, but when she came back, it was night and day. She talked and talked over and over and over about her experience. But I could definitely tell that it was a legitimate encounter and that she had legitimately been delivered. And of course, as the protective dad, I was in my mind, like wanting to like, okay, we'll see. So like every day is like, okay, is she going to say, hey, it's back? Or is she going to, I never expressed that verbally, but I wanted to know that it was gone, And sure enough, every time she shared the testimony, it was almost like it got stronger in her. And it was exciting because you could tell it was 100% authentic.
I do remember just a distinct change. Right after that, getting involved and even just being involved with the youth group and the truth that Brian would share, she just, I want to say, ate it up. You know what I mean? And she just grew so strong in her faith. And I would just see leaps and bounds, like the strength that she had come through. And so it just emphasized that she had such a breakthrough. Even speaking the truth, like she grabbed hold of the truth. And we have things that she wrote and for a school project, and they just were so good. They were like, they should be published. Some of them spoke, I feel like, to her freedom and what other kids could experience. So yeah, I definitely saw just the strength. And she just is so diligent and dedicated with where she's at with the Lord.
Brian Connolly at the time was my youth pastor. And so he was actually my youth pastor when I went to that conference. And then he stepped out to do Faith Like Birds. And I did an internship with him for a year after high school as well. And I loved just traveling to places with him to share my testimony. And like one of my favorite things is to pray for that, because I know that if God can do it for me, he can do it again. And it's one of my favorite prayers is like, God, whatever you did in me, do it in them and double it. So yeah, that's definitely impacted me in such a cool way to be able to have the opportunity to share my testimony so that other people can be set free too. There have been times where I felt tempted to believe those lies, but definitely diving into identity. Brian had a lot of identity classes around that time that I had that encounter. So diving into like identity, hearing like identity message after identity message, like just solidified that even more of like distinguishing the voices of what was the enemy and what was God. And so that definitely helps even to this day to distinguish his voice.
Yeah, I think there was definitely like a coming out of and going into principle, because it was almost like, she was ready, but then this anxiety came on, and then boom, it was gone. She was delivered, and it was almost like, okay, now it's time to get to work. And she began to be under Brian and like praying for people and like just really, really going after things. So I think that was a huge principle of the coming out of and going into. Had there been nothing there, I think it would have been susceptible for her to come out of that and then not go into anything, and definitely go, have a tendency to go fall back into that mindset.
She has, even still, I feel like sometimes she has such a strength that like we can count on her, like, even if there's somebody else in the family or something else going on, we're like, ask me. Like,
yeah, I think we go to her for counseling more than she comes to us for counseling. Yeah.
And it is that daily time with the Lord. And I know she does it, and I know she takes it and she grabs hold of what he's saying. And I'm so blessed by what God did and the freedom. Esperanza means hope in Spanish. So,
yeah.
She definitely is a beacon of hope.
No, I could cry.
Here we go.
No.
Seeing her walk with the Lord is like, I'm good. I'm done. I don't really need anything else. I would say if your teenager is dealing with something hard and something deep, I'd say as a parent to go deeper, for you to go deeper and just cry out on their behalf and just then let God do what he does. I think a lot of times we want to fix it. We want to quick fix it. We want everything to be okay. We don't know what to do. So we press the panic button and we want to go every route except just falling on our faces and crying out to the Lord. And he wants to fix them. He wants to help them. He wants to change their life and change their heart. I think a lot of times it's just us crying out on their behalf. And then there's it's a win-win because we grow closer. Our kids encounter the Lord.
It is an encounter, and it was something we didn't do when she went to that conference. And that's where she encountered the Lord, but just continuing to put him in front of her, like being able to encourage her with where she's at and to send her to a conference, to send them to the shout. That's where it's gonna change, is when the Lord meets them, when they meet the Lord, when he breaks through the lies.
It sounds so cheesy, but like just seek Jesus in that prayer time. I think sometimes we almost even, like if I can say it, we almost even give anxiety or these thoughts too much attention that it doesn't deserve. And so I've been learning, like, we can take thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ. And so I think, just give yourself grace for that repetition, right? Because those thoughts come, they're repetitive, but continuing to fix our eyes on Jesus, he'll show us things that are way bigger and way stronger than what we're walking through. Just know that you're not alone, and there is so much freedom. The enemy will try to isolate you and make you think that you're the only one thinking that or the only one feeling that, but God knows your situation, and he knows yeah, he knows us better than we know us, and there's freedom for that.
Hi guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and subscribe and comment, and follow us at Faith Like Birds on our Facebook, our Instagram, and on all our other social media platforms. Now, if you feel compelled to give to us in any way, you can do so at faithlikebirds.com/partner.